Within the last week, we've seen intense level of violence between members of El Músico, that is part of Chapo Isidro, fighting against Gente del Guano in areas around Badiraguato. This video shows two up-armored vehicles belonging to El Músico fighting Gente del Guano. But who are they, and how do this fit within the Sinaloa Cartel Civil War? As many of my regular listeners know, you know I use active cartel maps to give you guys an explanation and a visualization of the latest violence that's going on in Sinaloa and across Mexico. And in this video, I'm going to give an example of what's going on. I've already highlighted in previous videos of the overall situation in Sinaloa and more specifically the situation related to Badiraguato. But here is an update because the violence that we're seeing related to Chapo Isidro and Musico is a very key development in the Sinaloa Cartel Civil War and the conflict impacting Badiraguato. Within the construct of Sinaloa, I've already highlighted that Gente del Guano is probably the minor player within the Sinaloa state, and they're the smallest faction active in Sinaloa that don't have that much influence. And as you can see in the entirety of Sinaloa, you would have to really zoom in to have an understanding of who Gente del Guano is. And it's this small territory, right smack dab in the middle of Sinaloa. This is the territory of Gente del Guano. And the reason why he controls this is El Guano is el brother of El Chapo, Joaquin Guzman, who's in prison of the United States and the former leader of the Sinaloa cartel. And Badiraguato is the birthplace of El Chapo. And so his brother has always had a predominant role in this city and has absolute control over this area, but he's still a very small player. His main rivals right now continue to be Mito Flaco, highlighted in purple, and Chapo Isidro, highlighted in yellow. And both of these factions have now declared war on Gente del Guano. And the reason why Gente del Guano is able to hold territory is because of an alliance he was forced to make with Los Chapitos. Los Chapitos are the nephews of Gente del Guano, the sons of El Chapo, and Los Chapitos are engaged in a very violent civil war with the Mito Flacos because of the split of the Sinaloa cartel. Los Chapitos were forced to enter into an alliance with the Jalisco New Generation cartel. And lately, since last month, if not longer, we've seen an increased amount of Jalisco New Generation cartel members and Chapitos fighting in Badiraguato, right here. We have seen probably much more members of Jalisco New Generation than we've seen of Los Chapitos. And the irony of the situation is that El Chapo, the former leader of the Sinaloa cartel, whose active enemy and major threat was Jalisco New Generation, well, now, because of the Sinaloa Cartel Civil War, Jalisco New Generation is now in the area where Joaquin Guzman was born. And that is a crazy development that is really changing the situation on the ground. For weeks, we've seen the main axis of the offensive against Badiraguato coming from the Mito Flacos. And there has been various groups, but one specific one are Los Rusos, who are based out of Sonora, which is the border. The other main group to see is the Los Cabreras, who are part of Mito Flaco and have a predominant control of Durango. And one of those main factions that they had that kind of fights against Sinaloa Cartel Civil Wars, for example, El Comando Táctico Escorpión. And other groups that we've seen active in Sinaloa, for example, is Grupo Flechas. Mito Flaco has a lot of groups and factions underneath him that he can leverage for this war against Los Chapitos and Gente del Guano. But the video I showed at the beginning was Chapo Isidro, specifically one of the factions being called El Músico. But who is El Músico and why is he important? Well, El Músico is basically one of the leaders of Mesa Flores organization, or Chapo Isidro, and has had a long history of being a key drug trafficker in this region. Here is a sanction list from December of 2023 from the Treasury Department, highlighting the organization of Chapo Isidro, also known as Mesa Flores organization. The Treasury Department identifies them as members of the Badiraguato organization, which is correct. Chapo Isidro historically belonged to the BLO. The Justice Department still labels the BLO as a faction of the Sinaloa cartel, but it's important to note that the BLO-Sinaloa cartel split happened a long time ago, and to really lump those two together is not necessarily true because they've both been actively fighting for years now. And Mesa Flores, or Chapo Isidro, is clearly one of the remaining key leaders of the Badiraguato organizations, historical leaders that he formed his own group around Guasave, Sinaloa. And El Músico is right here. He is one of the top leaders of Chapo Isidro, heavily involved in a lot of drug trafficking, and his fighters are the ones that we've seen in the video at the beginning of this recording, showing up-armored vehicles fighting against Gente del Guano. As you can see from this map, the territories that Chapo Isidro controls yellow, and their base of support is in Guasave, this small area here. And the fighting that we're seeing between Chapo Isidro, specifically El Músico, and Gente del Guano is centered around this northern part of Badiraguato because of the territorial control here, while the Mito Flacos press along these areas in the eastern and northeastern sections. Chapitos and Jalisco New Generation Cartel are intended to keep Badiraguato under their control and have dedicated significant amount of forces. This has really changed a lot of the situation on the ground in Sinaloa. And although historically in the Sinaloa Cartel Civil War, we've seen violence centered in areas such as Culiacan or areas outside of Mazatlán and other key towns and areas in Sinaloa, within the last couple of weeks, a lot of the violence has centered around Badiraguato, and that is now the new focus of this war. And again, although Badiraguato does have drug production capabilities, specifically opium, we do see poppy fields in the mountainous areas of Badiraguato, and they do have airstrips that they leverage for air trafficking, for drug trafficking. It's not a key aspect within the overall construct of Sinaloa and doesn't really necessarily hold that much financial value compared to other areas, specifically Mazatlán, where Mazatlán in southern Sinaloa is a key port where a lot of drugs can be smuggled in or out and is much more valuable in terms of economic gains. But the reason why I believe Badiraguato is being heavily fought for right now is because both Chapo Isidro and Mito Flaco want to take Badiraguato because that's where Chapo was born. And they are intended to remove the Guzmans from power, the construct of the Guzman, the family of the Guzman. And the quickest way to do that from a psychological aspect is let's seize the territory that they're at, where El Chapo was born. That would be a huge psychological win. And clearly Los Chapitos and Jalisco Generation Cartel do not want that to happen. At the beginning of the Sinaloa Cartel Civil War, El Guano was neutral. He did not want to get involved, but he's been forced to get involved because Mito Flaco declared war on him, and now Chapo Isidro. If you recall, a couple weeks ago, we started to see rumors that maybe the alliance between Mito Flaco and Chapo Isidro has broken down. But frankly, based on the clashes that we've seen in Badiraguato, where both Chapo Isidro and Mito Flaco are engaged in combat operations there, I think those rumors were false and overblown. There might be internal tensions, but they're still fighting side by side against common enemies, specifically Gente del Guano, Los Chapitos, and Jalisco New Generation Cartel. Jalisco New Generation Cartel clearly is the most predominant cartel right now in Mexico. And Chapo Isidro and Mito Flaco don't want Jalisco New Generation Cartel to set up a strong base of support inside of Sinaloa and inside of Chapitos territory, specifically in Culiacan. But Los Chapitos have no other choice. And Los Chapitos are being absorbed by Jalisco New Generation. And Jalisco New Generation is going to establish himself predominantly in Sinaloa. And we're seeing Mito Flaco and Chapo Isidro try to remove them from power, but I don't think it's going to be that successful, or it's going to take a very long time for them to do it. Badiraguato is the town to keep on looking. I've already made a video about them in the past, highlighting a lot of the different aspects of the actors involved and the history of Gente del Guano, but the violence there continues to skyrocket. And the interesting aspect from that last video to now, that was about 2 weeks ago, is the involvement specifically of El Músico that really changes the situation on the ground in Badiraguato. Last week, we saw for the first time a video from members of Gente del Guano, Los Chapitos, and Jalisco New Generation Cartel threatening their rivals, specifically Mito Flaco, but also Chapo Isidro. But in that video, one of the factions that I alluded to earlier was the faction of Los Rusos, where you can see them stomping on symbols related to Los Rusos or another faction underneath Los Rusos or kind of part of Los Rusos or allied with Los Rusos called Los Limones. Los Limones are led by a man named P1. That indicated that affirmatively that Los Rusos are active in this area and now are members of Los Músicos. And we've seen video from Gente del Guano members and Los Chapitos calling out El Músico because of the violence that is impacting in this area. So again, for the next couple of weeks, this is the area to look at, is Badiraguato. Do we see Gente del Guano, with the support of Los Chapitos and Jalisco New Generation, continue to push away Chapo Isidro and Mito Flaco, or are they going to lose the territory? Because if it wasn't for Chapitos and Jalisco New Generation Cartel, Gente del Guano would be done already. They really need this, and they were forced into this alliance because Mito Flaco and Chapo Isidro simply don't care. They want to take Badiraguato. And this is the area now, the centerpiece of the Sinaloa Cartel Civil War. We'll see if that changes in the near future. We'll see if other areas see increased levels of fighting. Although Sinaloa as a whole has seen incredible levels of homicide and violence, and fighting does happen in other areas of Sinaloa, I believe that Badiraguato right now is the main focus. And with that, I hope you liked this video. Please comment below. Let me know what is the next area you want to cover, because I think this is an important topic, and I hope it made understand what is the situation in Sinaloa and the complexity of it and all the different actors and factions involved. And with that, I wish you a great day. Thank you very much.